Hey guys, and welcome to Bible Tea. We're on Job 3. I'm going to be honest. Like I said, I've read Job before, and I thought chapter 3 was kind of not really interesting. I didn't think there was too much to say, so I was like, oh, am I going to read 3 and 4 and then do a Bible Tea about both of them together? But then as I started to read it, I started to kind of pick up on some things. Just like the subtlety of the text and how it said things. And then, of course, I read some of my notes. I have my, not me amplified, my life application study Bible. But even before, I looked at those notes after I wrote my notes, in case there was anything that I wanted to add. But I just picked up on some subtleties. And I wrote some notes down. Of course, this is my notebook. I almost fell off the chair. This is how I've been taking notes. When Job's done, I'll do a flip through. Okay. So when we left off, Job's trifling friends had, come to visit him. They were making it all about them. And we've noticed that Job didn't really say anything. And I didn't really notice this until it said, "At last Job spoke." So the only thing previously that Job had said was basically, "Be quiet, you silly woman," to his wife. And he said, if the Lord gives, can't he also take away? And then he sat down and was just silent. And then here comes his trifling friends, and they sit down beside him, and they're quiet for a while, although they're making a scene, they're making it about them. And finally they speak, and they're like, basically, they're accusing him. What great sin you must have done to bring this upon your own head. And they're accusing him. So the people that are supposed to be his core group, the people that are supposed to be encouraging him and loving him and just being there for him, they're just like, you must have done something wrong. And there's his wife, curse God and die. So I don't know what hurt him worse. Well, until I read this chapter, I wasn't sure what hurt him worse. The things that he was actually going through because of Satan, because God allowed it, or the fact that he was going through this, but he had to go through it alone because his support group was accusing him. So I can't imagine what must have hurt him worse. So then it says, "At last Job spoke." And if you see me look over here, because I have notes over here. And it said, "At last Job spoke." So during this whole time, for the first test and the second test, he's not really saying much. I'm sure he was weeping, but he didn't really say much. And I think that's because Job was being mindful. How did I write this down here? There was a time of silence, as Job must have weighed his words. His first words were not against God, but rather he cursed himself. So Job opens his mouth, and the first thing he doesn't do is say, "I didn't do anything wrong." He doesn't hold up for himself. He doesn't speak against God. He doesn't tell his friends off. He doesn't tell his wife off. Well, he kind of, maybe a little bit, he was at least a little snarky to his wife when he told her to be silent. But really, when he first spoke, his words weren't against anybody. They weren't he wasn't trying to hold up for himself. He wasn't trying to prove himself wrong, because the people that were around him knew that he was a righteous man. So I don't know why his friends decided all of a sudden they needed to accuse him. Sometimes, if situations happen that people can't understand, people will automatically look for a reason why, instead of just saying, things happen. why did this happen? Why did God allow this happen? Why did God allow you guys to go through all of this stuff? And even Rocky and I have gotten. That's why I said. That's why I said. Job's friends were like, did you pay your tithes? It's probably because you're not going to church. Because we literally have had that said to us. Rocky's sickness is probably because you're not going to church. No, we're not going to church because of Rocky's sickness. Or, are you paying your tithes? Are you doing this? Like, immediately, in a situation that people can't understand, they wanna put the blame on somebody. Instead of, oh, maybe God's just allowing something to happen. So he's being quiet, and I think he's weighing his words to what he's going to say. Because I'm sure he had a lot to take in. And the first thing he says is, I curse the day that I die. Up and down, he's talking about, I wish the womb would have been shut. I wish darkness would have fell on the day that I was born. I wish this. And he's just like, I curse this day. And it sounds dramatic. It sounds like he's throwing a fit. That's what it sounds like. If you don't dig in deeper, it sounds like Job is just throwing a hissy fit and he's just acting like a toddler and throwing a tantrum. But that's not it at all. And you find this out as you read down further. And as he's cursing his life, at the end of it, he says, the thing I feared the most has happened to me. So the reason he's saying all this stuff and he's just like, I curse this day and I wish there was no light and I wish it was just darkness. And the reason he's saying that is because the thing that he always feared happening happened to him. And on top of that, the reason that he's saying he wished he never was born, because he would rather himself never been born than to be forsaken by God. Because, of course, he can't hear the conversation that's happening in heaven. He doesn't know that God is just testing him and that he's not actually forsaken. And I'm thinking, Job, if you only knew the impact that you've had on millions of people. If you only knew that you would be written about in the Bible. Like, if you only knew that what you're going through, your suffering is not in vain. But at that time, he couldn't see past the circumstances. He couldn't see past the feeling that he must have had. He must have felt like, God, you have forsaken me. And throughout this whole thing, until we get closer to the end, Job isn't really blaming God. Job is like, he put on sackcloth and ashes. His first response was worship the God that gives and the God that takes away. And now he's in pain. He's got these boils on his skin. He's sick. He says, amongst all my moaning and groaning, and he just feels like his life at this point is worthless. Why did you even allow me to live, God? If this is what was going to happen, if this is what my life amounted to, why are you even going to allow me to live? And I will be honest. I have said that before. I have said that before to God. God, if this is what my life is going to be like, if suffering is going to be my portion, if pain is going to be my portion, if going through again and again with a little bit of reprieve, then again, then a little bit of reprieve, then again. Me and Rocky's entire marriage, we have gone through stuff. We've had weeks, months of reprieve, and then it's just like, bam. And so I have said that to God. I have been like, why? Why did you even allow me to be born if this was my portion? And now reading Job, it just is like, it gives me this understanding that everything is for a purpose. Everything is for a reason. Even including suffering is for a reason. There's a reason. So I can totally understand right now why Job is feeling like this. Because not only is he going through all of this stuff, his friends are forsaking him and accusing him. His wife has forsaken him. And now he feels worst of all. His God has forsaken him. How horrible must it be to feel like this was my worst fear? And it even says that at the bottom. This is my worst fear. This is my worst fear. And for his worst fear, it appears that his worst fear has come true. And so even in all of this, he's still not cursing God. He's still not doubting God. He's not saying, oh, you don't really love me. You're not really the God you say you are. He's not doing none of that. He's not doing none of that. He's cursing himself because he loves God so much that he would rather have not been born than to feel that his God has forsaken him. That compared to the people of today, there's such a huge difference between Old Testament and even New Testament believers, especially a huge difference between Old Testament and nowadays believers, because we can be so quick to say, why, God? Why did you do this to me? Why did you allow this to happen to me? We could be so quick to say, God, you're not being fair, God. That's not fair. We could be so quick to run our mouth instead of being like Job and it's just like quiet. And then when he does talk, it has nothing to do with being against God. It's like, I would rather not be born than to be forsaken by God. That's the amount of love and passion that he has for God. He's not saying, God, why'd you take my kids? God, why'd you take my money? Oh, there's some people today. There's some Christians today that would be cursing God if he took their money. There's some Okay. There's some Christians today that if they had just a fifth of what Job went through, would curse God right away. Back then, Job is what it looks like to be a steadfast, unmovable believer. Job is what it looks like to not be swayed and not be moved. And yes, he had all of these possessions. And I said before, we like our possessions. We like our stuff. Job had all of these possessions. All of this, like he was a rich, wealthy man. And he didn't cry. He's not upset because God took his possessions. Or even because God took his children. Because he said, God gives, God takes away. But the thing that broke him was the thought that the God he loved so much has forsaken him. I'm like, oh, I want to love you like that, God. Like, I love you. I love you. You know I love you. But man, I want to love you like that. Like, I think sometimes it's just like, my resilience and obedience does not hold a candle to Job. Those who are not really rooted in God, as soon as 1% of that happened to them, as soon as their money's taken away, they're ready to curse God. And instead of waiting for him to fix it, they're going to run out there and see what they can do. We're all guilty of wanting to fix our own problems instead of saying, allowing God to fix it when it's him. And even though Job, even though it sounds like he is having, a fit, like he's being dramatic and he is throwing a tantrum, it's his passion for God. It's like he is throwing everything he has, all of his feelings, because he's trying to just get it through, just display, just to get us to understand the feeling of being forsaken by God. He's using those emotions and those words and the emphasis that he gives to, because he could have just said, I wish I'd never been born. But he didn't. He goes, oh no, I wish I would have been this, and I wish this would have happened. I wish night would have fallen on this day. And like he gets into it. But he is using his words to display the pain he feels. It's not the boils, it's not the loss of his children, it's not the loss of his income that makes him that way. It's the very thought that he has been forsaken by the God that he loves that makes him act like this. I have read this in the past, and before I thought, he's throwing a fit. He's throwing a fit. We all throw fits. But that's not the case at all. Job isn't throwing a fit because God took his stuff. Job is wanting to be heard by God. He is throwing all of his emotion into this, trying to just exclaim the way he feels because he fears that he has been forsaken by God. He didn't once mention he lost his livelihood. He lost his kids. Like, he's not sitting there begging God for all the stuff back. He's like, I just don't want to be forsaken by God. Like, that is his fear and his passion for God. God, do not forsake me. You give, you take away, that's fine. But don't forsake me. That is his passion. That is his heart's cry. In chapter 4, his heart's cry, even though it seems to be hidden under a tantrum, he's basically crying out with his heart, God, don't forsake me. And for a man, he's mortal. He's a mortal man who has lost everything. And instead of cursing God or getting upset or complaining, he is basically crying out to God and saying, I would rather have not seen the light than for you to forsake me. That is amazing. That is amazing, and it's powerful. Chapter 3 has been a short one, but it's been really good, and I'm so glad to have this Bible, and to actually, like, for the Holy Spirit to just cause certain words to just catch my eye, to see these nuggets that I have missed. That's why it's so important to not just read through the Bible once or even twice, but just continue reading through it, because you're always going to get something different from it. Now I see why he's called a man of perfect integrity. Not perfect, but complete integrity. Because I probably would not be in the same state. I'm just being honest. I would not be in the same state as he was. So, Job, if you can hear me, thank you. Thank you, God, for allowing Job to be such a good influence on our life. Thank you, God, for putting Job's story in the Bible so that we can read it and we can have an understanding that suffering isn't for nothing. And I hope in heaven, Job got to realize that his suffering wasn't for nothing, and that his life has touched millions upon millions of people. Alright guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. God bless you. I'll see you next time. If chapter 4 doesn't have a lot going on, sometimes I may have to, like, there might be a couple of days in between them, because I might have to, like, kind of clamp a couple chapters into one, just depending. And then I also might not be able to upload every night. But as much as I can, I want to be able to just share what's fresh on my mind so I don't forget.